Joining us now, the two top lawmakers on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Chairman Royce and Ranking Member Eliot Engel. Gentlemen, welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Congressman Royce, before we get to that, let me ask you if you have any more details about the Reuters report saying that there's an imminent threat to our embassy in Uganda and American citizens there.
Well, remember, one of the concerns we have about al-Shabaab is that they've been doing recruiting out of Minneapolis. So you do have Americans with U.S. passports fighting for this terror organization. They had shown their capability in attacking the Westgate Mall. And now their focus is on Uganda because Uganda is an ally with the United States in this war on terror on these al-Qaeda affiliates. So, yes, we need to be prepared, and it is good that we've got some lead on the organization, but at the same time, we really need to be following those Americans who are leaving with passports because they might return to the United States to avenge Gaddafi's death, who is the leader of this organization that we killed a little more than a week ago.
Now to Congress and the fight against ISIS. The president says he can go it alone without Congress if he wants, but would like congressional support for his strategy against ISIS. I know there are several members who are introducing legislation to authorize the use of military force. Do you believe Congress needs to do this? And if so, can politics be set aside? Congressman Engel?
Well, I hope politics can be set aside, and I believe it will be set aside. We're all Americans, and we have to protect our homeland. There's really two issues here. One, the president believes that he has the authority without Congress to continue to do what he's been doing to ISIS in Iraq and in Syria, airstrikes or drone strikes or things like that. But when it comes to asking for a training operation to train and arm vetted Syrian rebels, there he has to ask Congress's assent, and that's essentially been his position. There are a number of people in Congress who believe that he needs Congress's assent in both. My view is he can initially invoke the War Powers Act, and so he doesn't initially need Congress's assent, but of course it would be a lot better to have it, and he certainly does need Congress's assent to arm and train the Syrian rebels. And let me just say that I'm glad he's doing that. I supported doing that 2 years ago, and I think this is something that's a good thing in the direction that we're moving.
Chairman Royce, there may be little appetite for some lawmakers, including a number of Democrats, to take steps that would get the U.S. engaged in a full-blown war, and that's why we're hearing many don't want to vote right now because they're facing tough re-election bids with the upcoming midterms. And they don't want to be tied to a vote that gives the okay for military force. Do you believe Congress must act before members leave town for the midterm campaigning, and shouldn't we see real leadership here?
One of the reasons I've scheduled a hearing next week, in this upcoming week with the Secretary of State, is so that we can have the Secretary of State flush out the details of this plan, but so that I and my ranking member, Eliot Engel, and others can press the administration so that we see what additional authority is needed as we move forward. Certainly there's some questions here that we need answers to. We would like to see Saudi Arabia, the UAE, pay for this because, frankly, you know, their necks are on the block in terms of ISIS and ISIS's attempt to overthrow those regimes. So they should be stepping forward. They are providing training bases, but how about troops? How about paying for this? How about their aircraft joining some of the NATO aircraft in the air that's going to support the U.S. effort? So another point is cutting off terror finance. What are we doing to make certain that the oil money, controlled now by ISIL, is not gaining them more hard currency from other countries in the region? There's going to have to be legislation to address this. And lastly, what are we going to do to help the Peshmerga forces, including those women in those battalions out there fighting against ISIL? How are we going to get them the weapons, as well as the Free Syrian Army and other forces that are fighting ISIL? Because so far they don't have the anti-tank weapons, they don't have the artillery they need. And as you know, they're seeing a situation today where many of those ISIL fighters are refusing to engage Turkish women in these battalions. They're afraid if they're killed, they won't go to paradise. And the women have been mocking them for this, but they're down there on the front fighting, and they're saying, we don't have the equipment we really need to push them back. Let's get them that equipment. Congress will have to address that issue.
Well, I hear you, but what about getting a vote before they break away for campaigning for the midterms? Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, I think we will have votes on a number of these issues. The question will be the scope, and that's something that we'll debate next week when we go back, and we'll start that debate in our Foreign Affairs Committee.
Congressman Engel, I'd like you to respond about the fact that the president wants to put a coalition together. We don't have major allies at this point, like England going along with us. And as far as the Middle East, we've talked about Turkey, which is the best help out there, but there are reports that Turkey doesn't want to let us use their military bases for airstrikes in Syria or Iraq. When this kind of thing happens, do you think the United States has to use real pressure, like Chairman Royce is pointing out, to make these countries understand that if you don't help, don't expect to put our men and women on the line to protect you?
Well, I agree with Chairman Royce. This has to be a coalition. This cannot be the United States once again trying to impose its will on a Middle Eastern country. Look, terrorists are terrorists. You just spoke about the al-Shabaab terrorists. Whether they're al-Shabaab or Hamas or Hezbollah or ISIS or ISIL, they're all cut from the same cloth. They use terror to try to gain political goals. And the whole world has a stake in it. I hope that Congress, to answer your question before, will vote this coming week on a continuing resolution which keeps the government funding. That seems to be the easiest way of voting monies to train and equip Syrian rebels. But I absolutely believe that there has to be a coalition and that the Arab states really need to be involved. Saudi Arabia has agreed, we're told, to allow the training of the Syrian forces, the rebels, on their soil, and this has got to be a broad-based coalition. Our allies in Europe are a lot closer to the Middle East geographically than we are. I think the entire NATO alliance is really hanging in the balance. We have to show that NATO is relevant and can do the kinds of things that we need it to do, and we need people to step up to the plate. It can't be the United States alone.
Absolutely. All right. The stakes remain high, gentlemen. We will be looking forward to hearing what develops out of next week's hearing. We appreciate you both joining us today, and we'll be checking back with you.